Before succumbing to death, the last thought that Ira Takuto had was that the dark and sinister entity in front of him was the epitome of evil. After a lifetime of struggling with illness, dying at the age of 18 was frustrating, but he still accepted it very calmly, even to his own surprise. His consciousness and senses were falling into darkness, and he finally experiences death. He feels like something touched his fingers. He wonders what was it. If it's a grass or a rock. It starts to get brighter. He opens his eyes and he was in an unknown place and was sitting on a stone structure. He wonders if it was the place where people go after death. It was cold there. A mysterious girl appears from the woods and Takuto recognizes her black dress. He could not believe it, as it was from the game called Eternal Nations. It was a country management simulation game. Atou, the girl in front of him, was one of the hero units in that game. In the game, players play with several races and nations that exist in the fantasy world, trying to dominate the world in a turn-based game. The game was perfect for Takuto since he spent his days from one medication to the next after his parents stopped coming to see him. He got so much involved in the game that he completely forgot about his loneliness. In the end, he managed to become the top player in the rankings and even started being called a legendary player. It was all thanks to the unit Atou that he managed to accomplish his feat before dying. But now Atou was in front of him in a place where he was thinking of the afterlife. She tells him to calm down. She praises his great talents and recognizes him as a legend. Takuto asks her why did she know this. She replies that she remembers everything that Takuto told her. The times they together conquered the world and the times they lost as well. She remembered everything. Using her was Takuto's policy and his playstyle. He admits that his body was weak, so he always wanted to become like her. He was really glad that they were having this conversation. He asks her if it was heaven and she called him there. She replies no. She tells him that she did not feel like it was heaven even when she arrived. This new world was feeling a lot like the Eternal Nations world. She knew that it would sound cliché, but asks Takuto to start a new life in that place with her. It was not a world they knew, but still she was ready to start all over again with Takuto and build their kingdom with Takuto. Takuto also ponders a little about this offer, but first he wonders what else could he do with his body now that he could move freely. He wanted to test it out. He asks Atou to accompany him to build their country, a kingdom for just two of them. Atou does not hesitate and accepts the proposal. The system message appears that the new game has started. The difficulty of the game was not certain yet. They were both very embarrassed to formally start it all, but it was better that way. Takuto asks Atou if she remembers what their evil nation of Mynoghra must do first in order to lead the world to destruction. Atou remembered it well. The only one who managed to clear the game with this particular country with a secret playstyle was one person. They needed to become shut-ins. Even though Mynoghra was the evilest nation in the official setting, its civilization trait was specialized in internal administration and had a handicap in combat, making it a super specialized country in domestic affairs. Then they produces a long-legged bug from the scout unit using the mana they had. They both finds it disgusting. They both knew it from the game and had seen its 3D model. The real was a bit too much for them. They wonders what to do with it, and then Takuto commands the bug in the name of Glorious Mynoghra to go and check the area around them and to also avoid contact with any beings as much as possible. He gives him the task of surviving basically. The bug leaves at once obediently. Atou was a little worried about it but realizes that its only job was to follow orders, unit leaders' orders like that. Takuto could even share their vision to some degree. Things were going very smoothly for now. Atou asks Takuto how much mana he has. Takuto tells her that he started with 200 and after producing the bug, now he had 100 manas left. He could make anything if he had enough manas, but the emergency production cost was high and he should not really be using it at this point, but they needed to know about their surroundings. They both had some manas left, but wasting any of them unnecessarily was not an option. Atou was a unit hero. She gets stronger with time, but her current combat power was only 3. So, if they encounters an enemy even of level 5, then she might get crushed. The difficulty of the planet was really high. The bug keeps scouting the entire place. From its vision, Takuto also gets a grasp on most of the terrains around there, but it was still just forest everywhere. He assumes the forest to be really big. Atou tells him that neither they have seen any food icons yet, not did they yet faced any enemies. Forest terrains usually have a concealment effect, so it was ideal for them, but still, having no wildlife was strange for them. They decides to continue for a little longer. Atou was feeling sorry for not being very useful. For Takuto, just her company was sufficient. Atou was extremely happy to hear that from his king. She was supposed to be a hero from the evil country, but she sometimes looked very cute. He suddenly has an epiphany and wonders if this was how her personality was from the beginning. Then suddenly he hears the bug contacting him. He shares his vision and sees what the bug was witnessing. There was Dark Elf settlement, which confirms that they were in a fantasy world. The Dark Elves were generally neutral but were a little closer to evil. It was kind of a relief for them. Atou tells him that they could be lawful Dark Elves as well, and if they were Dark Elves from another country then they were doomed. Bordering another nation this early would be the worst thing possible. They plans to simply run away if it ever comes to that. So, they decides to first get more information on these Dark Elves. But then fate plays with them. Suddenly some Dark Elves finds them. Those elves were having a hard time surviving while traveling. Their captain was Gia, and there was an elder called Molter. They had already got the information of Takuto and Atou's arrival. Molter warns Gia that he feels like something evil was sealed within the forest. But Gia was not ready to compromise on this. His people were starving. He had no choice but to search for food in every corner of the forest. And in search of food, now they were in front of Takuto and Atou. Gia sees Takuto as a completely dark spirit, the epitome of evil in the shape of a human. He knew that his actions might decide the fate of his entire race now. He had to choose his words carefully as well as his conduct. He bows down in front of Takuto and introduces himself as the captain of the Dark Elves, Gia Najiv. He apologizes to him for having entered his forest without permission. Atou asks him if he completely understands that entering a foreign land like that is a sin. She asks him if he has any specific excuse or reason for committing such a crime. Gia explains her everything, how his Dark Elf clan once lived in a land at the center of the Idaragia continent. He knew that Atou was close to the dark spirit and could be as dangerous as him. He was speaking very cautiously and slowly to calm her down a bit. But this backfires and Atou shouts at him to speak briefly. Gia and the others gets really scared. Then he quickly tells her that they were persecuted and chased out of their land and they had nowhere else to go, so they ended up in this forest. He regrets it telling like that as it was not completely explaining their situation. Takuto was looking as if he has no interest in hearing all that. Then suddenly he hears from Takuto something which surprises them all, as they were not even expecting him to be able to speak. He asks Gia how did they all become so skinny. Gia answers that after sheltering in a place, they ran out of supplies on the way and came to the forest to look for some food but failed to find any. Some of them had not eaten in several days. He was getting a feeling that even after begging for mercy, they will be punished by the dark spirit. He just wanted his clan to be happy, but now he had made the situation even more complex. Then Takuto drops an apple in front of him. He tells them that it tastes great with rabbit. They had never seen an apple before. It was a completely unknown fruit for them. Takuto gives them more apples. They tasted and were mesmerized by its sweet taste. Gia shouts at them for eating it carelessly like that. Then Takuto gives them some pears too. Atou tells Gia to accept the gift from the king. But instead of eating it himself, he begs Takuto to give their children, who were also starving. Their women and children were really weakened from hunger. Then finally Gia and the other men arrives with food. They mash the fruits and gives it to them. They all thanks Gia for saving their lives. They all eats to their fullest. Then after knowing the story, Molter tells Gia that he has been tricked by Takuto, that he would never give something without wanting something in return. Gia gets angry as it was his only option to save his people. He was the only one who helped them and they were now wasting their energies arguing about it. Their people were no longer hungry and were sleeping peacefully, all thanks to him. On the other hand, Atou was pissed at Takuto for using all their mana to produce those fruits. Takuto tells her that their story touched him, that they needed at least that much food for surviving. Then the Dark Elves comes again and Takuto, despite Atou stopping him, gives more fruits. Takuto produces enough that they can feed everyone for a long period now. Takuto tries to explain Atou, but Atou was really offended. Takuto also realizes that he should have used his mana more carefully. He wanted her help with something. Atou also asks for forgiveness for being so rude to her great king. She tells him that there should be no problem if they produced that much food, as they still had manas left. She asks him what help did he want from her. He tells her that he could not speak well with the Dark Elves last day. Atou replies that he roleplays as a strong king who dislikes talkativeness. As per her, his behavior was perfect. But Takuto was really feeling like he has some communication disorder. He starts remembering all the time he had faced problems due to his lack of communication. Atou feels bad and tries to calm him down. She tells him that he can solve any problem in the game as long as he has wealth and military power. Then suddenly the bug appears and starts screaming. Atou scolds it, but it was Takuto who invited it back to their base. Takuto shares a vision and sees that the Dark Elves were returning to him. Takuto assumes that they might have come to take the rest food. He decides that he will tell them to leave after that. He was still not sure what should he do. He could not speak well and also was not sure how to negotiate with them. Atou had one good plan though. She takes full responsibility for it. But this time it was Molter, the elder dark elf. He shows his respect towards Takuto and tells him that they were all very glad to receive help from him, and that the food was very tasty. He tells him that he is the leader of the dark elf clan. Atou tells him that she can sense that he has something else to say. She asks him to speak it candidly in front of the king. She was enjoying to play the role of a strong, cruel ruler. However, Takuto was not sure about that. Molter also apologizes for Guy's rude behavior. It was just natural for them to show such unsightly behavior after seeing such a great being before their eyes. Then Molter asks Takuto his name with respect. Takuto realizes that he did not say his name to anyone the last time. Atou speaks loudly that he is the ruler of ruins, the king of apocalypse, Takuto Ira. She tells them to always speak with respect while speaking with them. Molter promises her that from that point his entire clan will always remember his name as the person who saved them. Takuto was happy that everything was going so well, but Atou is still playing her role. She tells them to now take their food and leave the king alone. But then Molter asks him what they can do to repay his kindness. Atou asks him if he can promise to do something that would satisfy the king. Molter tells her that they do not have any idea on what they can possibly do. Atou then refuses to take anything in that case. Takuto wonders if she got bored by them. He wanted to end the meeting peacefully, but Molter still wanted to give something. Atou was trying to tell him again and again that they do not want anything. She asks him if he was plotting anything. Takuto was smiling but knew that it was all very bad. He wanted to stop her immediately. He gives a look at her and she whispers that the dark elves suck at negotiating. Takuto wanted to tell her that she was not great either but controls it. She was doubting that they might harm them later if they let them go. She even wanted to kill them all. Takuto explains her that they might want an agreement where both the parties can take benefit. The way it was looking, even if they do manage to survive this one time, they still did not have a place to even sleep. It was not possible for them to continue such a miserable life. That's why Takuto decides to help them, but he will ask for something in return. He wanted to enjoy the conversation a bit more. Atou tells Molter that it's foolish of them to think Takuto is some evil dark spirit. Molter lies that they would never even think about it. Finally, she tells him that the king has decided to receive tributes in exchange of the offerings. Atou asks for something of the same value in return, but she had no idea of what was something of the same value. Takuto helps her and tells her to ask about them more about the outside world. Molter accepts the command and tells him everything about the world. Atou also considers this a good bargain. There were two reasons why Takuto did not want to let the dark elves stay in the forest. The first one was that their race belongs to another group. So, if those new world functions the same as the Eternal Nation game world, then just like in the real world, people of different civilizations and mindsets could cause conflicts. He wanted to build a nation using the forest as a base. Molter tells Takuto that they will be extremely grateful if he permits them to reside in the forest. But Takuto was against it. Atou shouts that they can never allow that they must leave the forest after taking all the food. Takuto sees them. They were all looking very tired. He assumes that they won't be able to make it to their destination if he abandons them here, and that would also make him feel very bad after he has given them food. Molter thanks him for showing kindness so far and asks him permission to now leave. But then Takuto stops him and asks him if they would like to become his citizens. Atou is shocked. She shouts at the dark elves that she will first talk with the king before any decisions. Atou asks Takuto what was he planning exactly. The dark elves were neutrally aligned to them, and that was exactly why Takuto wanted to use this refugee system to recruit them. That way their alignment would change there as well. Atou cries that they might come into conflict with the main race of Mynoghra when they produce them. Takuto tells her to remember the bug. He tells her that the creatures they will produce might be just like the bug. So, it was important to keep some intelligent species with them in the forest. And also they both disliked its appearance. Besides, Atou was also happy that Takuto was interested in something. She then gets up and tells the dark elves that the king plans on establishing a nation and he offers them to become his citizens. And if they agrees to become his citizens, then he would give them protection from foreign beings. Molter asks her what would happen to them if becomes his citizens. Atou smiles and tells him that she cannot promise them eternal happiness, but instead they will all become evil after becoming his citizen. It was kind of fun for her. Then 2 days later, Takuto and Atou were both going to finally check on the Dark Elves clan. Takuto could move better than before now. Atou was worried about if the Dark Elves will serve them as honest citizens. Takuto explains her that they can find it out only once they try it. The homunculus they were producing had faster reproduction rate but were really dumb. That's why their intellectual buildings always ended up behind other nations in research. It was important for them to get rid of this huge demerit. and also they could now have a civilized conversation with a different race. Then they finally sees the Dark Elves camp right ahead of them. All the elves bows before him, then they sees him. The elders were telling the others to not look straight at Takuto, or else they would also end up like him. There was a throne prepared for him. He asks all the Dark Elves to present there. Atou welcomes them all as immigrants of their country, Mynoghra. Then Takuto speaks up. He tells them all that he will look forward to make his new nation great. The system notifies him that with new citizens now, he has created a new nation under his rule. Atou congrats them all for being part of the history. She promises them peace and prosperity. The elves were waiting for the ceremony to end eagerly. But then they all feel something inside them at once. They feels hatred rising from deep inside their body for the ones who persecuted them and laughed at them like they were worthless. Hate was all over their mind now. Takuto asks them if they were all right. They all finally understands what it was like to be protected. They all starts cheering for Takuto. The two biggest countries on that continent were hardcore good aligned, and one of them was a human nation that worships a good god. The other one was an elven nation that worshipped nature. Atou tells Takuto that if they finds them then they will die. Takuto gets really worried. It was good for him that they got information about the area from Molter, but they were not expecting the nations with the maximum hostility to Mynoghra to be very dominant powers. The forest as the starting location for them was not really great, and what made it worse was that the forest productivity was 0, which means it was not possible for them to get any food or minerals or mana from there. Atou cries thinking about what would happen to them. In the game, even without development, it was possible to get food and minerals depending on the environment. That was the base of developing an advanced kingdom. But it was not possible for them. They were in critical situation. Molter comes to him and asks him if he should continue to explain him about the outer world. He looks at Takuto, who was looking extremely grim. Molter asks him if anything was bothering him. Then Gia comes and reports that he has brought one of his subordinates, Hajimeru. Hajimeru was also in charge of their intelligence. She was very knowledgeable about other countries' information and traditions. Gia believes that she can be of great help to the king. Atou tells him that the king was very satisfied with their dedication. She then tells Molter not to be so much formal. Takuto also did not like such strict formalities. Molter gets up. Takuto was feeling uneasy as he was an ordinary person and now was getting all this respect. Molter continues from where he stopped the last time, but then Atou stops him. She tells him that first they want to discuss their future plans. She tells them that they all have become important members of their national administration, so she was planning to assume each of them an important post. She gives Elder Molter country's management duty. Gia was assumed as the captain as he was before. Gia becomes very excited and starts telling him to what extent he will go for his king. It was a bit too much. Takuto himself feels weird about it. He tells Gia that there will be no need to do that all. Gia asks him how is he planning to rule the world then. Takuto tells him that wars was barbaric. He tells him that he likes peace more. Gia bows, but he was not very happy that their king was such a pacifist. But he looks at Molter, who is smiling blissfully. Atou tells them to also get plenty of rest in the meantime. And after that she was planning to build some proper houses. Molter thanks her for all the kindness. He tells her that unlike Gia, who only boasts about his strength, he can work on several areas. There was clearly some rivalry between him and Gia. Atou whispers in Takuto's ears that she feels like they both were hardcore workaholics. She asks him if she should now give them command to collect materials for making home or select the area for it. Takuto was thinking about giving them rest but realizes that it won't be a proper way to use their dedication and motivation. He wonders in what things the Dark Elves would be good at. He asks Atou to ask them to do terrain improvements without destroying the forests. Molter tells him that they are not as good as the elves that belong to the light, but they prefer to use the big trees rather than bare grounds. Atou replies to him that it will be a good start. Gia was again shocked to know that the king does not want to destroy the forest. Takuto tells Atou that the forest will be amazing with the effect of encroachment oriented. He was really looking forward to it. Takuto tells them not to forget reforesting and work properly. Gia asks him what he means by reforesting. Atou is shocked to hear that they do not know how to reforest. Even Elder Molter had no idea about it. She asks them if they have ever heard about military magic or the 6 elements. Molter tells him that they know about the 4 elements as it's the basic of their magic. They usually used magicians as a support to warriors, but never heard of military magic before this. Takuto thought that the technological level would be around smelting, fishing, and fortress construction. Molter realizes that their level of magical power was much lower than the King Takuto expected. Atou tells him that they really thought that they would possess some sort of terrain improvement technology, but the level was much more lower than expected. However, they did not know the reason why, but now that they knew that the world's level of magical technology was very low, then if they speed up a bit in development, then they can gain a huge advantage over the others. Then she explains them that reforesting means planting trees in an area previously deforested in order to preserve the vegetation. Molter replies her that if it's really all about that, then they does not need any magical technology, but the problem was that some trees might take even centuries to grow properly. Atou tells them that the reforest technique she was telling about was a magical element to accelerate plants' growth, and it was all thanks to Takuto who created this knowledge. Takuto was surprised to hear this. She keeps on praising him. Takuto was feeling weird about it. She even tells them that the king can do anything they ask for. Takuto was in great despair by now. Then Hajimeru tells her that some time ago, there was an outbreak of plague in the Holy Kingdom of Qualia and there was a massive amount of death. The Qualian priests said that it was a curse from a demon. Atou tells her that they probably might have hunted down the cats that lived in the cities too much, which might have caused a rat epidemic. The reason for plague was simple. First, someone dies of the plague and then the rats eat the body and become hosts for the plague. They had no predators to keep them in control. So, the number of rats that came in contact with the humans rose. Hajimeru was shocked to hear that the rats caused the people to die. Atou tells her that it's not the rats but the germs inside the rats that cause deaths. She explains her how there are small microscopic creatures in the world that they cannot see with their naked eyes. She explains further that there were several methods to deal with it, but bloodletting weakens the body, so it ends up having the opposite effect. Praying was effective, but it was not possible to cast it on such a large number of people. Then Atou speaks from her side that Takuto has taken the decision. Takuto, however, did not even say anything. He was simply how Atou was actually ruling in his name. In the land of the gods where the king used to live, there was so much knowledge that they do not know, she said. She even tells them that the apple that the king gave them was created in the land of gods. Hajimeru remembers the graves she ate. She tells him that she found some seeds in it and she planted them and it already was budding. Gia and Molter scolds her for doing something like that without the king's permission. But Takuto was actually regretting that he did not think of such an idea before. The things that Emergency Production created were all from the other worlds present. In the game, Emergency did not produce strategic resources, but now Takuto wonders if this applies to strategic resources that exist in the game. He decides to first get some industry technology and population to mass produce them. And even then, if he managed to gather enough mana, he could create the resources that changed the shape of warfare in the other world. He even created oil that became a trigger for so much mass killing all over the world. He knew that it was like a cheat code in a world that did not even know about reforestation. Hajimeru nervously asks him if she should not have done it without asking. With a grin on their face, Takuto and Atou replies her that she instead did a perfect job. It was like a big win for them. On the other hand, the continent of Idaragia was configured like two circles connected to each other. The south was called the Dark Continent and the north was called the Lawful Continent. The northern continent was controlled by the Holy Kingdom of Qualia, ruled by humans, and the Elementals Alliance of Elnar, ruled by the elves. These two major countries were building steady diplomatic relations. One of the major contributions to that was the ultimate weapon called a saint. In the Holy Kingdom of Qualia, polar belt at the extreme north, people were telling their griefs to the saint. She was Saint Selena of Splendid Burials. She replies them that such a sin shall not be forgiven. Thus she burns all the culprits. Meanwhile, at the Mynoghra territory in the Great Cursed Land, it was finally time for building forts and establish a proper nation. Atou tells Takuto that they must do it quickly in order to rule the world. She was expecting all the Dark Elves to contribute in it. It had been a few weeks since the Dark Elves became citizens. Everything was looking as if it was proceeding smoothly towards success. Takuto also now was wearing more fashionable clothes and was sitting comfortable in his stone pedestal. Mana was also being collected monthly from the citizens of the nation. The amount of collected mana was proportional to the degree of happiness of the citizens. In other words, the happier the citizens, the more developed his nation would become. Takuto was determined to guide his people to the ultimate happiness by himself. Atou was happy to see him satisfied. Their first topic was to have plan for building facilities. Atou tells him that first, they will create facilities for food production. It was clear that an empty stomach cannot fight, although there was very few possibilities that they would fight someone. Molter was also aware that the food production was one of the most important things, but he was wondering if the king himself could produce infinite food. Atou tells him that the king can easily do that, but there might be distribution problems once the territory expands. So, as per her, giving citizens facilities that allows them to harvest was essential. Takuto himself was wondering if he can achieve all the impossible feats that Atou was stating. Then she gives Molter a small tree and tells him to take care of it and let it thrive. Molter had no idea what it was. He asks Atou about it. She tells him that it's a flesh tree. Molter requests her to explain it further. She then tells him that it's a food production facility of their civilization. More precisely, it was a tree that bears a mysterious fruit that tastes just like human meat. Molter understood it, but he was still worried that even though their alignment had now changed to evil, he was sure that some people might oppose the idea of eating human meat. Atou tells him that it's just an experiment for growing trees. Molter calms down a little after hearing that. Takuto also realizes that people have their own like and dislikes. Then the system notifies him that the facility to be constructed had been selected. The flesh tree was first under construction. Second topic was the plan for research. Atou tells them that the technologies developed through research can greatly propel a country's power. Access to more modern technologies was very important for a small country like theirs. Molter asks Atou what kind of technology should they begin with. They did not have that much manpower to distribute, but they knew a little bit magic, which was also exciting for him. Atou wonders what kind of magic should they begin with. With regular magic, even if they have a great army, they can at most target a few dozen people. But military magic could affect great extensions of land, deterring even large troops. Molter was thinking that even though he takes pride of himself as a magician, and could target a few dozen people, but still developing it to the point of overpowering an army was like a miracle. Atou tells them that it's not that hard of a technology, so it can be developed very quickly. Molter realizes the level of magic that Takuto was actually recognizing. The system notifies again that research on military magic has begun. It was now time to plan for military affairs. They were inspecting the area, and then Takuto tells them that it was now time to make a hero. Atou also agrees on the idea, as that would reduce the cost and there also will not be much risk. Jia asks her what does they mean by a hero. She tells him that heroes are the subjects of the king who start out very powerful. They were all monsters with some loose screws, so they had a disposition for becoming stronger as time passes. Jia and Molter were not sure about understanding it completely. Atou tells them that there were also several restrictions with that, so they cannot summon all of the heroes, but it was possible to call one. Takuto also adds that since they currently need to keep their stealth, and having an entire army takes a lot of mana, food supplies, maintenance expenses, as well as being too conspicuous. So, Takuto decides to create only one for now. Atou tells them that bounty hunters might be near them and might think them as good price. So, it was possible to solve all these problems with a hero. Molter asks Takuto with respect if the heroes really were that powerful. Atou replies him that it will be faster to show him live. Tentacles appears from her back, which was shocking for them all, and she finally reveals that she was a hero too. She tells them that it was not a fraction of her full power. A single hero unit was capable of overpowering an entire troop. Jia was shocked to discover such unfathomable strength. Atou tells them that she will easily destroy Takuto's all the enemies. Then Takuto reminds her to clean all the random trees that were cut by her for demonstrating her power. Takuto sadly starts cleaning them. And then finally Takuto entrusted the Dark Elves with putting the plans forward. 1 month later, there were some proper houses built. Takuto and Atou were both very satisfied with it. Hajimeru was very happy to be a part of this work. Takuto asks her to give him a report on the progress of the project. Then Hajimeru gives him the details of all the homes under construction. However, since their efforts were currently directed mainly towards growing flesh trees, it was not developing that fast. She shows him the trees. The joint facility for both cultivation and food storage was proceeding very smoothly. The land cleared by lumbers was being used as the collection hub, farms, and others. It would also stay in store as a construction site in case future facilities require a larger scale terrain. Hajimeru tells him further that a spring has been found which can supply water. She was also planning for boring well in the future there. The building in front of them was being made for all bureaucratic proceedings. It was enough for the moment. She tells him that they can build more buildings in the future, but for now, this bare minimum was sufficient. Takuto was actually glad that Hajimeru took care of things that he did not even instructed her to do. The 3 things he chose to focus on for the prosperity of his country: internal development planning, research facility, and military planning were all going very smoothly. More importantly, all the Dark Elves who were so grim before were now working with a vibrant zeal. This was the first achievement for Takuto. Hajimeru tells him that all the Dark Elves were trying their very best to repay his kindness as much as possible. Takuto was glad to have them as his citizens. Hajimeru also gets emotional due to it. Atou tells her that she can relate to her. Then Hajimeru tells them that daily necessities were still lacking manpower. So she asks Takuto what to do about that. Takuto tells her that he will take care of the daily items and they do not need to worry at all about it. He did not want to rush in production though, as the quality might suffer. The truth was that they could only develop that fast because of his emergency production. Takuto tells them that they all can share the same house for now, but it was shocking for Molter.